What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. As the 2021 NFL Draft has officially concluded, and now it's on to the undrafted free agents, as the Giants have already started to bring in some players. To my knowledge, they've brought in 3 so far, 2 on the offensive line, along with a defensive end. I'll talk more about that tomorrow. Probably going to go live during the midday stream once they sign all their undrafted free agents, so we could talk about that, along with recapping some of the draft, and I'll have a lot more videos coming out along the way talking about guys like Kadarius Toney and the role I could see him having in this offense and how it may affect the wide receiving core. Same thing can be said for Azeez Ojulari, so on and so forth, and that'll be a lot of fun to have those videos. But in this video, I kind of wanted to just do a general overview of my thoughts about the plan that the New York Giants had going into this draft and how they orchestrated in some of the pros and the cons that I saw coming out of the draft. Some of the things that I definitely agreed with, and some of the things that maybe I'm scratching my head with. And I think if you're honest with yourself and you try to be as unbiased as possible, you're always going to see some pros and cons. And of course, in the end, this is only my opinion. Overall, I like what the New York Giants did. I'm not going to lie. I really do. I like what they did. Seems to me that they came in with a clear game plan and they thought long term. They didn't think just short term, especially with the trades that they made. And we're going to start there before we even get into the draft picks. The New York Giants, to me, clearly showed that they're thinking long-term. And I think Joe Judge definitely had an influence in this draft, being that he came from New England. They are notorious for trading down in the first round. Dave Gettleman had never done that in his career. And the Giants ultimately decided to trade down not once, but twice. Of course, they later traded back up to get the cornerback that we're going to talk more about in this video. But the fact that they traded down and got the draft capital that they did for future drafts, to me, they hit it out of the park with the value that they got. The first trade that they made, where they traded down from 11 to 20, the New York Giants got a future first, a future fourth, and a fifth in this year's draft, which they later traded to move back up. Then, in the second round, they traded down from 42 to 50 and got the same player they would have taken at 42 at 50, but got a future third, meaning that in next year's draft, the New York Giants will have 2 firsts, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. And when you're evaluating this draft, that needs to be factored in, because of course the New York Giants traded down, making it so they wouldn't be able to get as good of a player as they possibly could have to help next year's draft, and they helped it in a big way. Now, the thing that I love about that is, well, one, it creates insurance for Daniel Jones. If Daniel Jones does not work out, now you have 2 first-round picks, and if you're not picking high enough to get a quarterback of your choosing, you could couple picks up, move up, and get your quarterback. If Daniel Jones works out, which I believe that he will, and at least I think most Giant fans are hoping that he will, you could then either A, get 2 huge players for next year's team in the first round, or B, say the Bears do so bad that you're picking in the top 5, a team wants to come up and get a quarterback, you could then trade down and get more assets. And in a year where the New York Giants spent as much as they did in free agency and backloaded these salaries due to the fact of the salary cap implications going down due to the pandemic, the Giants aren't going to have a lot to spend next year. So I think they realized that. They loaded up on next year's draft, and they're going to be able to get a lot of high-impact players. They're going to have now 5 picks next year. You figure within the top 70 or 80, 2 within the top 32, and probably 2 within the top 20, if you're being honest with yourself. So I think the Giants did a great job in terms of getting value in this draft. Of course, had Devontae Smith been there, we'll never know. They may have selected Devontae Smith, and they may not have elected to trade down. But due to the fact that Smith was off the board, and due to the fact that they obviously were not looking to go offensive line, and we'll talk more about that in this video, I think the New York Giants knew that they were going to trade down. And when they traded down, they still took a playmaker with Kadarius Toney. So I want to commend them for that. They came in with a clear game plan, and just like last year, the Giants are clearly showing that they're not just looking for a quick fix. They're thinking about long-term. They're trying to build this team up the right way so they can have a decade of dominance. That is the clear game plan here for the New York Giants. They're not taking a lot of shortcuts. Yes, they spent in free agency this year, but they did it smart. To me, it was smart aggression because they saw that Daniel Jones was approaching the end of his rookie salary. All of these deals are really 3-year deals. I know the Galladay is 4, but you could get out after 3. And the Giants are thinking long-term. And I commend Dave Gettleman for that as well. So I think the Giants did a really good job from that aspect in terms of value. Now, when you look over the picks that the New York Giants made in this draft, they did have 6 selections. We're going to talk about some of the things I like and some things that I don't. And we're going to start with the thing that I don't. These were the 6 picks: Kadarius Toney, Azeez Ojulari, Aaron Robinson, Ellerson Smith, Gary Brightwell, and Rodarius Williams. And again, I'm going to do a lot more research on these later round prospects so I could talk a lot better about them, but I'll give you guys my initial thought process of the positions they selected and some of the things that I've heard about these prospects so far. And I've looked at some of their game film as well after the draft. The first glaring omission, and I talked about it several times, as well as several other Giants YouTubers and Giants fans, that the New York Giants decided not to do in this year's draft was not go offensive line. And yeah, I'll be the first to say that it is at least risky, in my opinion, that the New York Giants did not address an offensive lineman within the first 3 or 4 rounds of this year's draft. Gettleman came out yesterday and said that they were thinking about an offensive lineman in the 3rd round, but it didn't meet their value. The Giants felt like Aaron Robinson was so much better than any offensive lineman that was on the board at that point in time, and they elected not to go with an offensive lineman. The same thing happened today in the 4th round where they took Ellerson Smith, who several people had as a 3rd round prospect. The New York Giants decided to go with a high upside edge rusher in that spot. And I think what the Giants clearly did in this draft is much like they did last year, they went best player available. A lot of people did not like the fact that they took Matt Parrott last year, for example, after they took Andrew Thomas, but Matt Parrott was the best player on their board at number 99 overall, so they doubled up at the tackle. And the Giants, I think it's clear under Judge and Gettleman, they look for BPA more so than forcing a pick for a need. And that is blatantly obvious. They selected 2 cornerbacks in a draft in which we have pretty strong cornerback play to begin with. Now, I think Aaron Robinson could very well start this year, and if he doesn't, he's definitely going to see the field in certain packages. This guy, to me, seems like he could be a high-impact player when you watch him on film. He's very aggressive. We're going to talk about him a lot more in future videos, but I do like him. I do like that chess piece, and I do think that the New York Giants got very good value at 71 overall for him, but it was not a need. They did not need a slot corner, and you could say the same thing with the pick in the 6th round with Rodarius Williams. They went for BPA. They did not go for need. I personally would have liked a little bit more insurance on that offensive line, if I'm being completely honest with you, whether it be in the 1st round, the 2nd round, the 3rd round. I think a lot of Giants fans share that sentiment with me. Now, what I'm going to say is, what I hope is they are right. And what the New York Giants are doing, what Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge are doing, is they are banking on their decision last year with the offensive linemen that they selected. Last year, they took 3 offensive linemen in the first 5 rounds. Andrew Thomas, Matt Parrott, and Shane Lemieux. Shane Lemieux was good in run blocking, very bad in pass protection. Matt Parrott looked good in spurts and looked bad in spurts. And I think they're hoping that the young offensive tackles, Parrott and Thomas, are ready to take that big step forward this year. Thomas got much better over the second half of the season, and if you're being honest with yourself, the offensive line definitely got better over the last 8 games. Of course, Kevin Zeitler was with that unit. Okay? We have 2 guards who have never played on the right side before, or the left side, rather. No, the right side, I'm sorry. We have 2 guards who have never played on the right side because, of course, Kevin Zeitler was playing on the right side last year. So the question is, are you going to go with one of the free agents we've brought in to play that guard, or are you going to transfer Shane Lemieux or Will Hernandez over to the right side? And there's still a lot of question marks on this offensive line. And I think what the Giants are telling you is, we believe in Rob Sale, the new offensive line coach. We believe in Joe Judge. We believe in Dave Gettleman. We believe in the offensive lineman that we've already brought in could step in and get the job done. The other thing that I want to point out is, much like last year with Logan Ryan, we may still sign a free agent offensive lineman down the stretch, being that, the longer you wait, you may be able to get a guy in a bargain deal. People have brought up Trey Turner. Turner's been a good guard in the NFL. I think he's a 3-time Pro Bowler. He's still 28. He's coming off an injury. But of course, he's a former Gettleman guy. So maybe the New York Giants will have enough money in the budget to bring in a guy like that. That remains to be seen, and we'll have to wait and see. I do think it is at least somewhat probable that we will bring in at least a more proven commodity on the interior offensive line, even if he's not going to start, just to provide his depth, because I think we could certainly use it. Yes, we brought in some other players, but I would like a guy with a little bit more experience, a little bit more, more credentials to even back up Lemieux. If Lemieux doesn't work out, at least you could stick him in there, because I think it's imperative to be able to assess Daniel Jones this year. But the one thing I'll say about the offensive line, it is important also to have continuity. We've had constant turnover, with that line over the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And I think that is what the New York Giants are saying. We're going to let these young guys play. They started to slowly integrate them into the offensive line last year when Judge was constantly subbing in and out the offensive linemen. And we're going to see how they grow together. And hopefully they're right. Because if they're not, this could all go up in flames real fast. But I'm going to trust Gettleman, who has a track record for really being good in terms of his evaluation of offensive linemen. And I'm going to trust Judge, who, at least to this point, to me, has come across as a very smart mind. So let's get that out of the way. That is the one biggest con from this draft that I think a lot of New York Giants fans probably think they didn't address the offensive line, a glaring need in a lot of the fans' eyes. And clearly, Gettleman and Judge don't feel that way about the line as strongly as we do. In terms of the players we brought in, I love what we did in trading down. I absolutely love it. I love the value that we got. And then at 20, we took Kadarius Toney. And if you watch my reaction video, you know I was a fan of that player. I was a fan of the pick. Do I think it was a slight reach? Sure. But they wouldn't have gotten him at 42, and that was clearly evident today when the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Urban Meyer, came out and said they absolutely would have taken Kadarius Toney at number 25. I forgot what the exact quote was, but he basically said he was heartbroken that they couldn't take Toney at 25. So, yeah, you could say based off your evaluations or based off the mock drafts that you think that it was a reach. Regardless, they wouldn't have gotten him at 42, and one guy that a lot of people wanted at 20 probably was the same guy we got at number 50, but we'll get to him in a second. As far as what Toney brings to this offense, I think it is something completely different than any wide receiver we have on the unit. Very versatile. Could line him up in the backfield. Play him in the slot. He could be a home run threat. You could play him in special teams. He's a jack-of-all-trades type wide receiver, and I absolutely love the fit with this core. Okay? And I think they needed to add another weapon to this offense. Now, would I have done it in the first? Not necessarily, but had I felt what they felt about the offensive line, and they're obviously confident in it, I am not, and a lot of you guys that are watching this probably are not either, but if I was confident in the offensive line like they are, yes, I probably would have taken a wide receiver like Kadarius Toney had I traded down to 20. To me, it was between him and Bateman at that point, and Toney, to me, fits better what I think we need in this receiving core. So I think he's a high upside player, a really nice versatile piece that I'm really excited to see how the New York Giants implement into this offense with Jason Garrett. In the second round, Azeez Ojulari, I think 99% of Giants fans were on board with that pick. Maybe some more excited than others, but you're talking about a guy who had a first-round evaluation, dropped due to the knee injury, probably was more of a back-end of the first-round player that really fits our scheme. And at 50, it's a no-brainer. The New York Giants came out and said that they would have taken him at 42. You ended up getting an extra third-round pick next year with the trade down and still got him at 50. Of course, has ties to this coaching staff. We need an edge rusher. That's what he brings to the table, and I expect Azeez Ojulari to be an immediate impact player, and you got him at number 50 overall. Of course, we're very thin there. You don't know what Lorenzo Carter is going to be off the injury. You don't know what O'Shane Ximines is going to be off the injury, and you get another young player, still only 20 years old, with a lot of potential. Yes, he doesn't have all the edge rusher moves. He's not the most technically skilled player yet, but his ceiling is pretty high. And being that he fits this scheme, he's solid in coverage, I think Azeez Ojulari was a slam dunk pick there at number 50. On top of it, it filled a need. So with the first two picks, we filled needs. You could say it wasn't our biggest need, but we filled needs. Probably our second and third biggest needs. If you believe the way that I do, that the interior offensive line is still a major problem. In the third round, Aaron Robinson had a second round grade. He had a second round grade by almost any draft site that you go to. I didn't do any research on him because I, quite frankly, was not thinking about second-round cornerbacks, specifically slot cornerbacks. But when you look at this guy's highlights and you look at what he could do, this guy is a hard tackler. He's physical. He's fast. You can move around in the field. I'm impressed with him. He takes chances. He's got to work on some things. It's why he went in the third round. But Aaron Robinson could be an instant contributor, at least in some packages for this defense. And I could see Patrick Graham being very excited with a prospect like this. Darnay Holmes may or may not keep that slot cornerback spot. Maybe he will. He's more experienced. I like Darnay Holmes. I think he did very, very good. But it's never a bad thing to have more competition in that locker room. And Aaron Robinson looks like a bowler to me. And maybe they'll have some certain packages where they could get both of them on the field at the same time. And you definitely could use more depth at that position as well. I mean, we're one Adoree Jackson injury away from having to have Isaac Yiadom out on the field again. So I think it was nice to add another cornerback. I think most people want an offensive lineman there, but it was nice to add a good, proven second-round level cornerback at that spot at number 3. At the fourth pick, they went for a high upside edge rusher, Ellerson Smith. You could still argue a need. Like I said, you don't know what Ximines and Carter are going to be. Of course, we already got Ojulari, but you could still argue a need there. But to me, it was BPA. It was BPA. He was rated higher by most people than where he went. Didn't play last year. Went to a small school. Had 14 sacks in 2019. He's huge. He's 6'6", 252 pounds. Got to do more research on him. But to me, it sounds like a BPA pick and a guy with high upside in Ellerson Smith. And that's what the New York Giants did there. In the 6th round, I like what they did as well, getting Gary Brightwell. Gary Brightwell, by all accounts, is a north-south runner. I was a big fan of the New York Giants adding a 3rd running back to this unit, especially being that there's going to be an extra game this year with 17 games. You don't want your running backs to break down, and Saquon Barkley's coming off the injury. So I think that it was good to add a 3rd running back to that backfield, and I always thought that that was what they were going to do in the 6th round. So I was a fan of getting Gary Brightwell, and then Rodarius Williams. Some of the things that I've read on him so far, I'll do more research as the days go along, and then I'll have a video out on him. Seems like a very high upside pick there at number 201 overall with our last pick. And again, it's depth, and I think what fans have to realize is, especially once you get to day 3, you're not so much drafting for need, especially the New York Giants. If you didn't get that lesson last year, you definitely got it this one. They drafted 4 linebackers with their last 5 picks last year. They just went for guys that they thought could be contributors on special teams and fill some holes with this roster. And I think that's what they did with Rodarius Williams. They saw a long-term project, a guy that could potentially be a starting quarterback down the line. Maybe he helps at special teams, things like that. So that is what I think the New York Giants did. They filled some holes. They filled some needs. Did they go with the offensive line? No. A big goose egg there. Of course, they've added 2 as undrafted free agents, and they still could add that as the season goes along in free agency. And we'll have to wait and see if that's what they elect to do. Maybe a Logan Ryan type signing, but on the offensive line as the season gets nearer for a cost-effective rate. I'd like to see them do it because I would like to at least have some insurance for Will Hernandez and Shane Lemieux. We all know they've been sketchy there. But what I think they're banking on is continuity, the offensive line coach, the new weapons helping out the offensive line. You won't be able to blitz as much, and Daniel Jones having more experience in the scheme. And we're going to have to hope and pray that Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman were right. Because if this offensive line could perform at a league average or near league average level, this Giants offense could take a big step up in 2021. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.